This section explains the single idea that generates the entire book. The brain does not receive the world, it guesses it. A top-down generative model manufactures the expected sensory stream. Only the residue travels upward, the prediction error, the places where the guess and the signal diverge. That residue climbs to correct the next guess or to feed slower learning. This inverts the traditional arrow. Sensation stops being input to be processed and becomes a check on self-generated fantasy. Perception is controlled hallucination, reined in by error. Now weight each error by its expected reliability, its precision. The same machinery then yields attention, action, and imagination. One primitive, not a catalog. Clarke's framing move is the payoff. The predictive engine works as an engagement machine, the neuro-computational partner that embodied cognition was waiting for, rather than an insulated inference box. This section explains what perceiving really is. Perceiving is guessing, then keeping only what the guess got wrong. Clarke's slice anchor carries the whole book. To redraw a geological cross-section, you cannot trace it. You must twiddle the knobs of the hidden causes, sediment, erosion, and lava until the generated image matches the target. Command that generative model, and you understand geology. The drawing is merely the sensory evidence you reconstruct. Swap geology for the world, and the knobs for neural expectation. The brain builds incoming sensation top-down from its model of distal causes, and the signal itself does only correction duty, flagging where the guess failed. Perception is inference, running backwards through a forward model. The channel of contact is prediction rather than reception. This part explains why perception works in the opposite direction from how it feels. Perception runs backwards from how it feels. The naive picture is that sensory pixels flow upward, accreting into edges, then shapes, then finally the steaming mug. That is the picture Clarke discards in his opener about 2 ways to sense the coffee. Here is the inversion that does the real work. Your brain already holds coffee and office expectations and casts them downward, trying to generate the incoming signal itself. Only where the guess fails does anything propagate up. Perceiving is that guess succeeding. In Chapter 1, this is named perception as controlled hallucination, with the sensory barrage merely constrained perception as controlled hallucination, with the sensory barrage merely constraining which hallucination the does. This is the whole book's generative seed, mind as a prediction, machine minimizing surprise. From that single seed, action, attention, and imagination will all fall out as the same move. This section explains how the direction of perception gets inverted, and why that single move governs everything else. Invert the arrow. The received view runs sensation upward, pixels to edges, to shapes, to coffee. Clarke's chapter runs it the other way. The brain already commands the coffee, and office expectation, and sensation's only job is to correct the guess. Perception is what remains once prediction has explained away the incoming signal. Call it controlled hallucination, the mug you would have hallucinated, ratified by the light. Here is the generative primitive. An organism has access to nothing but its own sensory perturbations. The frog never meets the fly, so the sole tractable problem is inferring the hidden cause from the signal alone. That one problem, predicting your own input, underwrites both learning and online seeing. Everything downstream in the book is the same arrow, refined is the same arrow, refined. This part explains what attention actually is inside the prediction machine. Attention is a volume knob on prediction error, not a spotlight sweeping over content. The brain never receives signal and noise pre-sorted. It assigns the split itself by estimating how reliable each error channel is. That reliability is called precision, the inverse variance, and the brain turns each channel's gain up or down accordingly. One free parameter does all of this. It is second order, a confidence about a confidence, and it generates the whole family of behaviors, isolating the car keys, resolving the Dalmatian, trusting the fog-cleared patch, and, when precision is misassigned to a strong prior, hallucinating Bing Crosby in pure noise. This is the knob. Chapter 1's prediction machine still lacked. It is what lets one fixed inference engine flexibly reweight top-down against bottom-up as context shifts. This section explains attention as a single control setting rather than a moving beam. Attention is a gain knob on prediction error. The spotlight image, a beam. The brain aims across a scene, gets it wrong. The real operation is a volume setting the brain turns up or down. Chapter 2 carries a single thesis. The predictive brain does not merely register the mismatch between expectation and input. It estimates how trustworthy each mismatch is and multiplies the error by that confidence before letting it revise belief. Turn the gain up, and faint signal becomes percept. The hidden Bing Crosby. The Dalmatian, sine wave speech resolving into words, all one operation, precision, weighting, run at different settings. Noise and signal are not given in the input. They are the brain's verdict on which errors to heed. Attention, expectation, perceptual search, Clark collapses them into a single dial, adjusting the volume on how loudly the world gets to correct you. This section explains why a brain that predicts the world can also imagine it. A brain that perceives by running a generative model, reconstructing the incoming signal from stored knowledge of the world's causes, gets imagination for free. The same machinery that reconstructs while the sensory signal is present can keep running once it is gone. Strip the input, and reconstruction becomes outright construction. That single move yields imagery, dreaming, memory, and mental time. Travel as one package. Perception and imagination are the identical process at two operating points, one constrained by evidence, the other unconstrained. The dividing line is sharp. A bacterium following a chemical gradient maps input straight to response with no internal model, so it senses without ever being able to imagine. This section explains why perception and imagination are the same machine. A brain that perceives by predicting its own sensory stream already owns the machine for imagining. Imagination is that same generative model run with the driving signal switched off. Once perception is the reconstruction of the input from stored causes, reconstruction needs no input. Decouple the model from the senses, and dreaming, memory as replay, mental time travel, and deliberate simulation all fall out. Clark calls these the construction industries. One package deal rather than four separate faculties. The chapter's job in the book's arc is to collapse a distinction. Perception and the inner life stop being different kinds of thing. What perception does anchored to the senses, imagination does unanchored. The anchor is the only difference. This section explains why action is perception run in reverse. A perceiver kills prediction error by revising its model to fit the world. An agent kills the same error by changing the world to fit its model. Here is Clark's move. Motor commands are nothing but predictions of the proprioceptive feel of a movement not yet made. They are self-fulfilling prophecies whose only route to coming true is for the limb to actually move. The expert surfer lands the board in the sweet spot because she predicts the sensory flow of already being there. One error-minimizing loop, two ways to discharge it. Perception and actions stop being rival stories and become the same machine viewed from opposite ends, which is why you cannot tickle yourself. The prediction is too good. This section explains how action works as perception run in reverse. The same guessing engine that predicts incoming sensation can flip its direction. It predicts the proprioceptive flow that would obtain had you already moved, because the body couples to error minimization, predicting that non-actual flow drags the limb into making it real. Clark's surfer expects the sensations of the board in the sweet spot, and expecting them lands it there. The prophecy fulfills itself. Motor commands dissolve into predictions. James's straightened finger moves the instant you drop the counter prediction that was holding it still. This is the chapter that earns the title of Part 2. Prediction was always more than seeing. It is how a guessing engine acts. This section explains what attention really is in this framework. The standard picture makes attention a spotlight. The brain shines on the world. The truer picture is a gain knob on error. Everything else in the framework runs on prediction error, propagating upward. And this chapter's single move is that the brain never trusts those errors equally. It estimates each error's reliability, its expected signal to noise, and turns the volume up or down accordingly, so a confident error commands the update while a noisy one is ignored. Clark's handy figure is adjusting the volume on the signals that carry the news. The generative primitive to keep is that precision is second-order prediction. The system predicts not just what it will sense, but how much to believe what it senses. Attention, gain, and salience all collapse into that one weighting. This section explains how a single parameter governs the whole flow of influence in the brain. One knob does everything. Precision, the gain, the brain assigns to a given prediction error signal is the single parameter deciding which pathways speak and which fall silent. Turn it, and the fixed cortical hierarchy dissolves into a sphere whose flow of influence is sculpted moment to moment. The chapter's move is subsumption, attention, gating, transient assemblies, which Anderson names talons, even reading another agent's intention through mirror systems, all resolve to one operation. That operation is reweighting precision to reconfigure effective connectivity. Here is the surprise, Clark understates. The mechanism of attention is the mechanism that alters connectivity. The two are identical, not merely analogous. So a single neuron represents different things at different times. Its selectivity is on loan from context, never owned. This section explains the inversion at the heart of the chapter. The same predictive machinery that tempts everyone toward controlled hallucination, perception treated as a virtual reality held one remove from the world, is exactly what dissolves the veil. That inversion is the chapter's whole work. Inference does not interpose a representation between you and reality. The structured, probabilistic know-how distilled from prediction is what lets you see through surface statistics to the distal causes themselves. Two errors manufacture the fantasy reading. The first treats inference as a barrier. The second forgets that prediction exists to serve action. Its real product is a grip on affordances, not an action. Neutral image. The inference engine is the organ of contact, not a wall between agent and world. This section explains how the predictive brain can look like a sealed cell, and why that reading gets it backwards. The predictive brain looks like it seals you inside a controlled hallucination, every percept a top-down guess, sensation demoted to mere error correction. Clark refuses that inference. Two mistakes generate the veil. The first treats inference as a screen between the agent and the world. The second forgets that action selects and tests the predictions. Correct both, and the sign flips. A generative model earns its definition from what it does rather than what it depicts. What it does is deliver a grip on affordances, the environment's possibilities for a given agent. Same machinery, opposite verdict, turning only on whether you ask it for a picture or for purchase. In Chapter 6, the inference engine stands as a tool for contact rather than a barrier to it. This closing section turns the book's one engine back on the mind that runs it. The whole book built a single machine. Predict your sensory stream and weight each error by its estimated reliability. This last chapter points that engine at its owner. Nothing new is bolted on. The same precision weighting that sculpts perception, once applied to the reliability of your own signals, already is metacognition. Consciousness and its disorders fall out as settings of that single knob. The machinery itself stays intact. Delusion and hallucination are miscalibrated trust, a belief about a belief, where the warning light reports truly. Turn precision too high on the wrong source, and inference spirals coherently into Martians. From here, you can predict the pathologies before Clark names them. Each one is a single precision balance tipped, the self recognizing itself in the swirl. This section explains how a single control parameter, precision, generates the whole shape of human experience once you sweep it. Turn the machine inward. The same knob that ran perception and action across every prior chapter. Precision, your brain's estimate of how much to trust its own error signals, now generates the whole shape of human experience once you sweep it. Delusion, hallucination, the paranoid cascade off Adams's too sensitive warning light, none of these is corrupted sensing. Each one is miscalibrated confidence in otherwise intact news. The pathology is metacognitive, a false belief about the reliability of a belief. So the generative move is this. Hold the signals fixed, vary only the trust assigned to them, and the taxonomy of atypical minds falls out as settings of one dial. Consciousness itself becomes the next thing to read off that same parameter. This section explains how one control parameter dissolves a whole dichotomy. Embodied robotics said, intelligence is fast, cheap, world-exploiting tricks. Symbolic AI said it is heavy stored models. Clark's move is that predictive processing places these two as poles of a single continuum rather than rival theories. The brain is a satisficer. It pays the cost of building richer internal prediction only when cheaper body and world exploiting ploys will not drive prediction error down. Productive laziness is simply what error minimization does by default. Offload onto the world first, model only on demand. System 1 and System 2 fall out as settings of one dial, a single machine with a range rather than two separate machines. This section explains how two traditions that look like rivals turn out to be one mechanism at two settings. On one side sits model-heavy predictive inference. On the other sit cheap tricks that exploit the body and the world. They are the same mechanism, dialed to different points. Precision, weighted prediction error. Minimization does more than tolerate the lazy tricks. Think of the passive dynamic walker, the outfielder who runs so as to cancel the optical acceleration of the ball, the saccade used as external memory instead of internal storage. The mechanism selects these tricks, sculpting the simplest circuit that reliably drives the behavior. So the rich internal model and the impulse to throw away the world stop being opposed. Paradigms. They become two poles of one continuum, tuned by how far the brain trusts the precision of its senses. The chapter's move is subsumption. Embodied cognition is what predictive processing does when laziness pays. Once you see that, you can predict the rest. Every embodiment objection, the darkened room included, now reads as a special case of the one mechanism. This section explains what makes you human at the level of a single structural primitive. What makes you human is a loop. The same prediction error, minimizing brain that every animal runs becomes, in you alone, coupled to worlds you yourself build. You erect designer environments, language, notation, tools, institutions, their statistical regularities, then reinstall themselves as the generative models doing the predicting. World structures brain, brain restructures brain, brain restructures world, and the two iterate. The step that carries the whole argument is this. The brain's very generality, an all-purpose, unsupervised self-organizer aiming at no fixed task, is exactly what makes it reprogrammable by culture. Nothing special had to evolve inside. Being human is this recursive self-scaffolding. The same predictive machinery, caught in a cultural feedback, it manufactures for itself. This section explains why being human is a structural loop, not a better brain. Nothing new happens in the human head. The chapter's whole move is this. We run the same prediction error minimizer as any mammal, no special mechanism, yet we alone build the world that trains it, then feed that world's regularities back into our own generative models. The loop closes on itself. Consider the abacus, language, the notebook. These are designer environments, manufactured sensory patterns that retune the very machine that manufactured them. Sterelny called this downstream epistemic engineering. That is the primitive. A learner is defined not by its algorithm, but by its power to author its own training set. Being human is a predictive brain wired into a culture. It keeps rewriting so the culture can rewrite it back. This section states the single idea. The whole book reduces to. The whole book collapses to one quantity, prediction error, weighted by estimated precision. Minimize it, and perception, action, attention, and the recruitment of body and world all fall out as masks of the same variational move. You cannot separate seeing from acting, because both discharge the same error, one by revising the model, the other by revising the model, the other by revising the world. Here is the inversion. Clark closes on. The brain works as an action-oriented engagement engine, selecting the very stimuli it then predicts, rather than an inference engine sealed inside the head. Precision is the switch. It gates which transient, neural, bodily, and worldly coalition forms. To predict what the next chapter of any instance does, ask one question: what does minimizing weighted error recruit here? This section explains how a single primitive generates the whole mind. One loss function, prediction error, run in both directions, generates the entire mind. Perception adjusts the model to fit the signal. Action adjusts the signal to fit the model. Everything Clark spent 10 chapters building collapses to that single primitive, and embodiment falls out for free. Body and world are the cheapest terms in the same minimization, the intrinsic core rather than optional extras, recruited whenever offloading beats onboard computation. So the brain works as an action-oriented engagement machine, selecting the very stimuli it then explains rather than an insulated inner arena scoring apt descriptions. The boundary the chapter draws is against Descartes. What it affirms is inner and outer locked in one co-determining flow rather than mind estranged from world.